topic for this session. So this session we're going to look at gender, youth and social inclusion for climate action for food, land and water systems transformation. The session is organised by the CGIAR Gender Platform, the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT, the Ban Ki-moon Centre for Global Citizens, Climate Adapt Nepal, Climate Forward Pakistan, the International Water Management Institute in Nepal, and IAS World, the International Association of Students for Agriculture and Related Sciences, and also the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. So we have a wonderful array of organisations that are bringing their experiences and their knowledge to bear on this important question in terms of gender, youth and social inclusion for climate action and food, land and water system transformation. So our session today is organised around three critical themes. Our first theme is looking at women and youth-led climate adaptation. We all know that climate change adaptation or climate change disproportionately impacts vulnerable groups like women, youth and minorities. And it's important that their unique experiences are brought into the sway of all adaptation and mitigation efforts. And indeed, they're critically important for just transitions that are pivotal to the conversations here at COP29. So it's really important that women, youth and minorities are involved in testing, adoption, scaling up of climate, smart technologies and policies to ensure more comprehensive, just and effective climate action. So some of the key questions that we will be asking our speakers and our panelists, we have a really excellent lineup of speakers and panelists that will be joining us in a moment on the stage, are in relation to youth and women and their access to processes for climate adaptation is to what extent are they fully engaged in decision making and policy making processes? To what extent do climate vulnerable youth and women have access to finance, resources and assets that they need to make their agri-food systems more productive, climate resilient and equitable? So that's our first theme, and so if you can kind of keep that in your mind. Our second theme, we're focusing on water security and inclusive policies for water security. The situation in relation to water security is rather alarming. Global freshwater demand is expected to outstrip supply by 40%. 1.6 billion people will lack safely managed drinking water. 4 billion people of the 8.2 billion people on the planet currently live in water scarce areas. 1 in 4 cities face water insecurity. But from an agri-food systems perspective, growing populations mean more water is needed for food and energy and to run cities. Water is one of the key critical inputs for any form of agricultural and food production, and 70% of freshwater withdrawals are used for crop irrigation. So it's really critically important for the livelihoods of smallholder farmers, and particularly women, youth and minorities in rural areas, that they have access to policies and processes that are gender and socially inclusive. And so we'll be looking at social inclusion, gender inclusion in relation to policy processes for water security. And we have experts in our participants, our panelists that will speak to those topics. Then finally, our final theme is looking at the participation of women and minorities in capacity development. So training programs we can consider as capacity development. And again, there are systemic barriers to disadvantage for access to education of all types and training of all types. And we've got to think about this from a social inequality perspective. We should be reminded that equality of opportunity doesn't always equate with equality of outcome. And there's lots of terms like equity and equality that are widely used in the context of COP29 and other fora, but we should be aware that those terms can mean different things to different people and constituencies. Social equity has a strong focus on justice and fairness, and again, these are widely used terms here at COP29. So we need to think about what type of equity we're talking about. Is it distributional, is it procedural, or other perspectives on equity? So these are really important questions if communication between people in relation to equity is to be effective. So capacity building for climate action is enshrined in Article 11.1 of the Paris Agreement. So this session really is framed around a contribution to that by bringing together key actors and perspectives to shed light on what is practically needed for capacity development programs so that they foster more equitable and socially inclusive climate action for transformation of food systems. So we're going to hear the experiences from the Cliff Grads program, This is a capacity building program for early stage PhD researchers from developing countries, which is a component of the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases. The CliffGrads program is funded by the New Zealand Ministry of Primary Industries and the CGIAR, and is operationally supported by the University of Galway. So a key purpose of this session is to discuss ways that we can ensure women and other disadvantaged groups, including youth, are positioned to lead climate action and justice from the front as farmers, researchers and entrepreneurs. So our invited speakers will be sharing insights and collaborate, and they're going to insights on actionable strategies to promote inclusivity and resilience in our food systems. We're going to hear from them on their experiences of advancing women and youth-led climate adaptation. So at that, I'm going to move to the next part, where we're going to hand over to Byron Reyes, who he's working with the Alliance of Biodiversity and CIAT. I'm going to introduce Byron. Just one moment. So just briefly get Byron set up here. So Byron is a scientist at the Alliance of Biodiversity International, CIAT. He's experienced in research and development across Latin America and Africa. And Byron's going to present some of the results of a study that has been underway to try and understand what are systemic barriers to access to capacity building programs for climate action in agri-food systems. So over to you, Byron.
Thanks, Charles. Good morning, everyone. As Charles said, my name is Byron Reyes. I work at the Alliance of Biodiversity International and CIAT, and I'm going to be presenting on behalf of my colleagues and my co-authors challenges and opportunities for increased participation of women and minorities in capacity development programs. And we're going to be talking about results of one case study that we did, which is the program that Charles already explained a little bit, the CliffGrads program. So this is the Article 11 states, among other things, that capacity building should enhance the capacity and the ability of developing country parties to take effective climate change action. This can be achieved through different mechanisms and at different levels. So this capacity development program that we are evaluating, and we took the case study for the study that we did, we consider that is one mechanism that can be used to contribute to this goal. So what's a key challenge, as Charles was mentioning a little bit, to ensure that socially inclusive training that not only fosters equality in opportunities, but also on outcomes of the participants, for the participants, particularly for cohorts who are poor or otherwise marginalized. So what we did was a study to understand constraints and opportunity, so the participation of women and minorities can be increased, and also how can these kind of capacity building programs can be strengthened to become more inclusive. We took the CliffGrads program as a case study, and what we did is two online surveys. One was for the students who applied to get the fellowship, and another one was for the host country supervisors who supervise the students during their internship. But because of in the interest of time, I'm only going to be presenting results of one of these surveys that we did, and for one small part of the survey data that we have. So the results, going to the results, the main challenges include that they face. And the results will be divided in two sections. The first one are challenges and opportunities for improvement through the application process. So that is before they receive the fellowship, and then they go to do the work that they are supposed to be doing during the fellowship. And the second one relates to challenges once they become fellows. So there are different challenges that they may experience in the host country where they visit. So during the application, the main two challenges that they pointed out was balancing family responsibilities and educational pursuits. The applicants see this as challenging because, for example, one of them say, I had two children, one 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and leaving them for 6 months to pursue my education and ambitions is a very difficult consideration that will play into my decision on whether to apply or not to the program. So, and the second one relates to financial struggles. Sorry. And resource limitation, they not only need to provide, some of them not only need to provide financial support to their immediate family, but they also provide support to some other relatives. For example, one of the respondents say that I not only support my family, I also provide financial support to my siblings. So living and for 6 months to do an internship can play a financial burden on that responsibilities that they have. Now, this changes a little bit depending on whether the applicant is a woman or a minority. No? In the case of women, I will see there, the commonality is that balancing family responsibilities and educational pursuits is the most important aspect, regardless of whether you're a woman or a minority. But then for women, it becomes more important to coping with illness and loss in the family. Not only in the immediate family, but also in the extended family. So similar to the financial responsibilities that they have. One respondent said, you know what, I had my father was sick, so I could not leave him for 6 months to do this internship because I needed to take care of him. In the case of minorities, the second most important factor is relates to the financial struggles and limitations, which I already explained in the previous slide. Now, this was during the application process, right? Now, once they become awardees, they receive the fellowship, and then they go, or they have to decide to go to do the internship. The challenges relate to mostly to processes that they need to complete in order to be able to land in the country where they are supposed to go. The first one relates to getting the visa sorted out. That is what the awardees reported as one of the most challenging parts of the whole process. And the second one was ensuring the bank information, which is understandable because that's where they will receive their stipend for the expenses that they have to incur in the host country where they are going to be doing the training. Similar to before, this varies a little bit depending on whether you're a woman or a minority. In the case of women, the most important challenge was getting the visa, so securing the visa so they could go there. And in the case of minorities, the most important challenge was ensuring having the bank information ready so they can get their stipend, so they can cover their expenses in the host, in the country where they are going to be doing the practice, the internship. Okay. Now, one particular or key aspect of this program is that it matches PhD students with researchers around the world. And the match is done based on the research interest. So what is expected from the supervisors is that they will provide guidance to the students and during this period of stay. So we ask the applicants how satisfied they were with the encouragement that they receive from these supervisors. So if we see at the bottom, most were satisfied. However, when we analyze the information on whether the female was a respondent, or whether the minority was a respondent, we see that there is a little bit less satisfaction from women and from minorities on the encouragement that they receive from their supervisors. So these are aspects that need to be considered to try to see what this kind of program can do for the host country supervisors to keep in mind when receiving students from all around the world with different backgrounds. So how can this kind of program become more or encourage more women to apply to the program? The main 2 reasons included enhancing female participation in scholarships. And for that, there were some key considerations. One was either making specific calls for women or also increasing the number of female supervisors for female applicants. And the second was enhancing the program visibility, and there were different mechanisms that were recommended here. Perhaps 2 key ones were not only identifying the key media to advertise these calls, but also the content that is used to advertise the calls. So highlight that the program is inclusive, that there is opportunity for women, so more women can apply. And then the second one was that they suggested that it will be important to showcase successful cases of female awardees. So that will be a mechanism to motivate new female applicants to apply. In the case of minorities, very related. The first one, to increase the participation of minorities, is prioritizing and supporting minority applicants. One recommendation, one setting quotas for minorities when the call it's open or is advertised. And the second one is finding mechanism to encourage them to apply. In the second case of strategic advertising and partnership for inclusive outreach, it was something similar to what the females say. The first one is identifying right partners that support the participation of minorities in this kind of program. So to see whether the GRA, for example, can partner with them so they can provide additional support for these applicants. And also showcasing successful stories from minorities who have already completed the program as a way to encourage minority applicants to apply. I'm running out of time, so I'm gonna skip this one. Just to conclude, the challenges to engage or to apply to the program are diverse. And depending on whether you're a woman or a minority, they may be slightly different. But they include balancing family responsibilities, financial constraints, and coping with personal issues. Once they become an awardee, they receive the fellowship. The challenges are mostly related to how to get into the country where they are supposed to do the internship. So getting the visa sorted out, and then also getting the financial information that they need in order to receive their stipend. What recommendations were highlighted to increase the participation of women and minorities? For women, it was increasing the program visibility and female participation in scholarships. And for minorities was strategic advertising and identifying key partners that can support this process, and also prioritizing and supporting minority applicants. And finally, well, I didn't talk about this slide, but in the slide that I skipped, it was some recommendations to make this program better. Although they say that the program is functioning well, there are some improvements that can be made. One of them is offering family and gender-sensitive support. For example, they mentioned that well, many have young children, and they cannot travel with them. So if they are allowed to travel with them, they may need some support for childcare support, for example, because if they have to be 8 hours in the research center doing the work, somebody needs to take care of them. That will have financial implications. So those are additional considerations that need to be taken care. And then also the last point relates to the training and professional development. One of the recommendations was that there has to be, this professional development has to be culturally sensitive, because we have students from different cultures and backgrounds going to countries with different backgrounds and cultures. So the recommendation is to make this work in a way that the research that they will be doing and the training that they will be receiving is culturally sensitive. And that's it from my part. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Byron. And I think it's really great that these types of studies are being done on ongoing capacity development and training programs such as the CliffGrads program. They're really necessary for refining and improving programs so that they promote social inclusivity and that we can increase the access for youth, minorities, and socially disadvantaged and women and socially disadvantaged groups to ensure that these equalities, not only of opportunity but of outcome, are reached. So at that, thanks again, Byron, and thanks to all involved in the study. It's really important for guiding the CliffGrads program. So I'm going to move on next to our next piece, which is the Ban Ki-moon Center is a leading center involved in social inclusion and inclusivity for women and youth. And I'm going to hand over to Beatrice Rocca, who's going to introduce a video that Ban Ki-moon Center have put together for us, and that would be a prelude then to a speaker, one of our key speakers here, Ife, who's going to share her experiences and recommendations for youth and women's social inclusion in relation to climate action in agri-food systems. So Beatrice, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for an insightful presentation. It was very, very interesting. Hi, everyone. My name is Beatrice Rocca. I'm from the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. And at the Ban Ki-moon Center, we're particularly committed to empowering women and youth for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement. We also aim to elevate the voices of smallholder farmers, particularly women and youth, at international climate conferences such as COP. And that is because their voices are so crucial and they have to be heard by policymakers, decision makers, negotiators, and the international community at large. This is critical because smallholder farmers, they are at the forefront of the climate crisis, but they contributed the least to it, and they urgently need to adapt to it. Also, we work closely with CGIAR because we believe that agricultural research and innovation are essential to build the resilience of smallholder farmers to the climate crisis. Earlier this year, we traveled to Rwanda and we visited a seed-producing company called INJ Harvest, where Emma, the founder, is working with smallholder farmers and particularly women. And she's empowering farmers with climate-resilient and nutrient-rich beans. And we shot a video there, so I hope you will enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Today we are here 1 hour outside of Kigali at a farm that is called INJ Harvest. We are here with Emma, and Emma has led us around and has shown us how she's actually producing her crop. Her staple crop is beans, and these beans are special because they are particularly nutrient rich with iron and zinc, and they are climate resilient, and that is the reason that it's particularly attractive for the smallholder farmers that she is working with.
My name's Wera Emma, a CEO and founder of INJ Harvest. It's a seed company doing seed multiplication for beans, soybean, and maize. Beans are a crop for women, and I wanted to help them. They are growing varieties which are not resistant to drought or pests and diseases. So far, I have reached more than 65,000 smallholder farmers. Before, I would reach maybe 3,000 farmers selling 5 tons, 10 tons. Now I'm selling up to 40 tons. It's a big achievement to my company.
My name is Yvonne Uwase Munyanjeri. I work for CGIAR as a senior research associate. We focus on bean research. I support farmers through capacity building. I make sure that the technologies that we have get to farmers. We combine crop information with climate information and make sure that they know which type of bean variety to grow in which area and when to grow it, and how many kilograms should they expect to harvest.
We do know that only 0.8% of overall global climate finance is actually benefiting smallholder farmers. And that is far too little, because smallholder farmers feed 80% of the sub-Saharan continent of Africa. We are, as the Ban Ki-moon Center, very interested to support smallholder farmers because they are the ones that are hit hardest by the climate crisis. And it is the women and the youth that suffer the most. So we work with agri-champions, agricultural knowledgeable experts who are doing their share to produce climate-resilient crops.
We subject raise Rwandan Youth Agri-Champions in Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizen. All of us, we are there to make change in the climate adaptation.
My name is Eli Drugut. I'm the founder of CGIAR Africa. I come from Nairobi, Kenya, and I'm a youth agri-champion with the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizens. This program has really given me skills and also exposed me to so many things, especially on issues to do with climate finance, the challenges that smallholder farmers have.
No one wants to accept the reality that climate change is already happening and we are living within this crisis. We need to see concrete steps being made. We need to see reforms being taken to accelerate land ownership. We need to see a whole new paradigm approach by academic institutions and scientific research institutions to involve local communities. We cannot keep on complaining about these issues for a very long time because the climate crisis is not waiting for us.
they do need more support by the international community. So from policy level as much as from research level, but also even in the extension services and in the field work that they're experiencing day in, day out.
Thank you, Beatrice, and the Ban Ki-moon Center for that wonderful video, which really does communicate both the challenges but also majorly the opportunities for greater social inclusion and greater participation of local actors in improving the livelihoods of smallholder farmers and the importance of youth and social inclusion. The Agri-Champions approach is really super to see, and we have an Agri-Champion here with us in person that I'll introduce in a moment. But it's also really great to see the work by CGIAR. CGIAR's been working on biofortified beans for decades, and CGIAR, by working with Ban Ki-moon and local organizations, it's really great to see those beans, which are essentially women's crops, improving the livelihoods of households and also improving the nutrition of households. So it's great to see all of that. So our next speaker, I'm going to introduce, it's Ife Olatayo. She's a Ban Ki-moon Ban Ki-moon Center Youth Agri-Champion. She's a Nigerian agripreneur. She's a founder of Supa Farm and Market Limited, a climate-smart enterprise that uses hydroponics technology to plant food and supports rural smallholders with solar-powered irrigation to gain resilience against the impacts of climate change. She's trained over 6,000 youths and farmers and has an impressive record of achievements, including in fact, she was a Borlaug Adesina Fellow, a top 20 Jack Ma's Foundation Africa Business Hero, and a top 10 Youth Adaptation Awards recipient. So we're really honoured, I think, to have Ife here. And Ife really is going to speak to her experiences and her recommendations, and also what she considers would be the main message at this COP29, which has an overarching theme of climate financing for smallholders and for climate action. Over to you, Victor.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ife Olua, as rightly introduced. I'm a youth agri-champion with the Ban Ki-moon Center for Global Citizen. And I run a business in Nigeria called Supa Farm and Market Limited, where we work with smallholder farmers, particularly women. We give them access to finance in the forms of improved seeds, drought-resistant fertilizers, pesticides, ameliorants. We also give them solar irrigation support and agronomic support for them to be able to adapt to the impact of climate change. So far, we've worked with over 300 smallholder farmers, particularly women in our neighborhood. We've connected them to over $90,000 in funding for them to be able to cultivate their land sustainably and make fair prices for the produce that they sell to market. We have improved their yield by 62% and been able to increase their profit by about 31%. And we've been doing this majorly leveraging technology like artificial intelligence to get the right information through satellite monitoring and geospatial analytics to get that information, feed it into a system, connect it to the financiers that are willing to fund these farmers. We also want aiming to leverage blockchain technology to make it traceable, smart, and also transparent funding for the smallholder farmers. And as I am an example as an agri-champion, I also have a number of agri-champions with the BKMC, the Ban Ki-moon Center, that are doing extremely innovative solutions, curating it for the problems or challenges that are faced, particularly by women in Africa, women smallholder farmers. There's a friend of mine, agri-champion, called Daniel Anaba. Daniel Anaba is from Ghana, and he is the founder of Eco Impact Limited as well. And majorly what he does is access to finance for these women in Africa, smallholder farmers that need funding for their farms. So majorly, we know that farmers are particularly structurally excluded from agricultural loan because they do not have historical data of their farm, and of course no financial or commercial institution would be willing to invest in a high-risk enterprise that doesn't have a record to tell them, to make them, give them a good loan decision process. So Daniel Anaba with his enterprise is trying to help these women farmers, giving them financial literacy, training them on record keeping, how to run their farms, and then making it structured and easy for these women farmers to be able to access the loan that they need through commercial or every other financing means. So that way, through the training that is given to them, record processes, very little, we could say, permit me to use idiot-friendly, simple apps that make it so simple for those uneducated farmers to be able to simply just record something that is digitized and accessed by financiers, and then they're able to give out loans. And after this training, it also helps them facilitate grants with access to concessional loans, simple returnable grants for them to be able to use to cultivate their land, access market, and return the loan. There's another agri-champion of the BKMC, that is Sumeya Juma from Kenya. She's the founder of Drought Smart Solutions Limited. So majorly what Drought Smart does is they use Internet of Things to deploy irrigation systems. So that system, when it's fixed on a farm, there is a remote a sensor that is able to know what the plant needs, that particular plant needs, so what quantity of water, so that way that water is properly a resource, an important resource in food production, is properly managed, and it irrigates only when the plant needs to the plant needs to be watered. And that innovation, she also added DS Farm app, which is an app that beyond just watering the farm, because you know the satellite monitoring is getting all those information and feeding it into an app that could also use artificial intelligence to give recommendations to farmers in cases of pest breakout or diseases, and give recommendations of what to use, what kind of fertilizer, what kind of farming practice to make sure that things go well and on the farms, particularly for women, because oftentimes they are disadvantaged, and once these things happen, they are not prioritized in form of giving them succor for the losses that they have on their farm due to drought or flooding. And now, as all these examples are great when it comes to how women can be supported, and as an agri-champion, or as a cohort of agri-champion, there were 20 of us selected across the continent that we came up with a demand paper, which is a recommendation of mine today as a solution to what we could leverage to support women smallholder farmers. We have 3 recommendations that I'll be sharing, but most importantly, these are not just recommendations. I mean, these are tried and tested solutions that work, that are scalable, that are replicable, that we want to see more of it happening around the world, especially for women, especially for youth, especially for the disabled or differently abled farmers that are in our rural communities. The first is that same access to that finance. Making finance very simplified for farmers is important. And as much as we know that there are a lot of innovators on the agricultural value chain, and we can access funding to give to farmers, there should also be a consideration that farmers need to access, these women farmers need to access the financing directly. Women farmers honestly have a high constraint to finances. They are not prioritized, both commercially or even on social interventions. They are not really, until there has to be a thesis that is focused on women. They are not generally the top of mind. So giving access to these women to be able to get the finance that they need in a simplified grant, it could be a grant process, it could be a very, very concessional loan process, but prioritizing them to make sure they access it, not making it, not giving a huge barrier like eligibility requirements that is out of place for them, requesting for audited statement, requesting for registration process, reporting process that we know that they might not be able to, to give, which automatically just excludes them. We need to make this financing very easy and very direct for women farmers in Africa. The second is access to data and information, like my friend is doing with Drought Smart Solutions. Information is very important. I mean, we can give the finance and deploy as much as we want. We can do the training, the agronomic support. But when the information of what to plant, when to plant, what not to plant, when to harvest, and what kind of the right fertilizers to use, the right method of ameliorant, how to apply it. If we do not have those information at the right time for the farmers, it's as good as all the money, all the grants, all the trainings, everything can go down the drain because we do not have that information, that especially when it comes to geospatial or meteorological data information that is needed to run their farm. So access to data and information prioritized for women in a very simplified way on their feature phones. They should be able to access it as soon as they need it and make actions, give recommendations for them to take actions and solve it. We know that we have to just place them at the forefront. And then thirdly, for these women to be able to access the two, I always call it the two most important resources when it comes to farming, land and water. Without land and water, there is no food. And we can run different programs, but we know that it's when there's farmable land, of course, farmable land that can be used for agricultural purposes. So there's also an agri-champion that worked on that as part of his PhD with the Alliance for Green Revolution Africa, that's Alicios. Majorly the barriers were how do we get access to land and how affordable are this land? What are the taxes that are around this land and how can we get reforms for these taxes? It could be tax-free for youth, it could be tax-free for women, to make sure that we already have the interest in farming. And itself, I can say that farming is hard, especially in Africa. Farming is tough. It's physically intense, and you have to put a lot. You have to be passionate about it. You have to love it like a baby. So giving me a land tells me that as a youth, I could just give it a try. And of course, if I get a good result, I would want to go all out for it. But if I do not have the two most important resources, the land and the water, I might just be disinterested and want to take up another career path entirely. So giving access to women, youth, to that land that they need, or clustering us into an area that has a dam, then giving that irrigation water for us to be able to takes off a lot of challenges and burden from us. So that access to the important resources, those are the three demands that we created during the Agri-Champion program with the BKMC, and we are giving it as a recommendation today to be taken, and it could be in form of what policy adjustment could be made, what kind of support we could get for us to be able to thrive as women farmers in Africa. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Aoife, and please do stick around because we will have questions from the audience for both the panelists and the speakers towards the end of this session. And Aoife, it's really great to have the demand paper from the Youth Agri Champions because it brings to bear the experiences of all of the Agri Champions in relation to what is necessary, and that's critically important in the context of this particular COP29, which has an overarching theme of climate finance, both the quantum and the nature of that finance, but what's really materially important is how that finance reaches and is accessible to youth and to women farmers, and that I think that's from the bottom up in a sense we're hearing the kind of messages from Aoife, so that's really critically important. Our next part of this session is our panelists. So we've got four panelists, I think. So I'm going to invite the panelists up, and there's one panelist that I'm not sure if they're here quite yet, but bear with us. So if Hajar could join us on the stage, yeah, that'd be great. Also Josie, yeah, and also Darshini, okay, and then we have a colleague from Bangladesh, but I don't know if they're here as of yet. Yeah. Okay, so if you would join us, and I'll introduce you all then in turn. I just got to get you on my phone here. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to introduce each of the panelists in turn, and then we'll step through questions for each of the panelists. So we have Farzana Islam Nafia, on the edge here, is a young professional in agricultural science and climate change, holding a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from Khulna University in Bangladesh. She's a knowledge and research manager at LEADAR, a prominent Bangladesh NGO, and she's working on a project funded by Germany's Bread for the World, aiming to build climate resilience through sustainable practices. So you're very welcome, Farzana. Okay. And then to Farzana's right, we have Darshini. So Darshini is a research group lead on climate finance policies and processes at the International Water Management Institute's strategic program on water, climate change and resilience. She has over 15 years of experience with diverse organizations from government, research institutes, multilateral development agencies, private consulting firms and NGOs. And so very welcome. It's really great to have you here, Darshini, to speak to the water security and the social inclusion aspects of that. And then over here we have Hajar. So Hajar is from Morocco. She's an agricultural engineering student at the National School of Agriculture in Meknes in Morocco, and she's currently in her 4th year. She's a member of the control board of the International Association for Students in Agriculture and Related Sciences, or the IAAS, and she previously served as Women in Agriculture Coordinator. So you're very welcome, Hajar, also. Then finally, last but not least, we have Josie. Josie Dawson is New Zealand's agriculture negotiator for the UNFCCC. She works closely to support the Secretariat of the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases, the GRA, which is the body that runs the Cliff Grads program that Byron spoke of the study in relation to. She's a background in educational policy, agriculture, climate action development, and indigenous approaches to sustainable agriculture. So you're all like super welcome, and it's really great to have such an esteemed panel and an all-female panel here at our event today. So what we're going to do is if you remember back to the 3 themes we had for this session, first theme was women and youth-led climate adaptation. Second was inclusive policies for water security, and the third was participation of women and minorities in capacity development or training programs. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask each of the panelists. A question in relation to each one of those, and then we might go around it again. Okay, so just bear with me. So I'm going to start with Hajar, and so Hajar, a question for you. So what financial supports are most crucial, do you think, to enable women and youth-led climate adaptation? And what organizations should provide such financial supports, and why should they provide them? If you have any kind of thoughts in relation, or your reflections and experience in relation to that.
Okay, maybe can I stand there?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Hello everyone. I'm Hajar Kouriani from Morocco with an agriculture engineering student, and really it's absolutely honor for me to be here as the representative of the International Association of Students in Agriculture and Related Sciences. 67 years ago, students from 8 member countries come together to found EAS. And at that time, we're only present in those countries. But with the collaboration and initiative with different partners, we are now present in more than 54 countries around the world, connecting the 10,000 plus students almost from 160 universities. And yeah, I'm really privileged to speak to you about how finance can be used as a tool for gender equality and empower women in agriculture and to transform our food system. In fact, in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, there is a call for a full gender equality to be a reality for every woman, with all barriers to their empowerment eliminated. But yet, as we convene here today, the investment in gender equality lags behind most of other development goals. So, do you think that women have equitable resources to financial resources? So, I think finally we'll transform our agriculture and food system. So, I think financial tools such as saving groups, microloans, and mobile banking are more than just economic support mechanism. I believe they are tools of empowerment in giving women a voice in decision making, building resilience, and innovatively driving agriculture. So we open new avenues when we provide access to capital, enabling women to expand and diversify, increase their household incomes, and contribute and make a worthy contributions to the community growth. So I want to talk about saving groups, for example, which are an important strategy in improving underserved communities, especially in rural areas. I'm sorry. In rural areas. So those saving groups have a limited paperwork. Members can make small irregular transactions, and the operations are conducted very close to their community. And this is a reason that most women would find it convenient. In the Sava region of Madagascar, communities are very entrenched with the culture of vanilla, and the Fandariaka project initiates saving groups to help and support its women and youth. So members are work together for a fundraising emergency that's invest in their local level in small farming school projects and business enterprises. This have helped them to improve their economic resilience as well as their voices in the community. So what we see here is the power of available community financial services to make a transformational impact. Similarly, worldwide have pursued and create new ways to increase agriculture commodities value, diversify crops, and create a higher value products, all aimed to increase household incomes, increase food security, and improving the entire food system. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hajar, and it's really great to see that there are practical financial mechanisms in place that can lead to empowerment of women and youth, but the question is the scaling and the access and the extent of those is a major issue. So I'm going to move next to Farzana, and what Farzana, in terms of there's been a concept around like transformational climate adaptation that would have like social benefits, if you want, arising, and multiple benefits arising from climate adaptation. And this call is coming from the IPCC and others, but yet there's some reluctance within the COP29 negotiations to consider this. So where would you see sort of opportunities and barriers for women and youth-led adaptation that could lead to transformational change, both for women and youth? What are the opportunities that you would see?
Okay, thank you very much for giving me the floor here. This is Farzana Islam Nafila from Bangladesh. Currently, I am working as Knowledge and Research Manager of an NGO which is situated in the southern part of Bangladesh, named Local Environment Development and Agricultural Research Society. And beside that, I have completed my Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from Khulna University. So whenever I was studying agriculture in a university, I learned some things from there. And one day I thought like that, okay, fine, I am learning about agriculture or climate related things from an institution, but what is actually going on in the field level? I should have idea about that. That's why after my Bachelor of Science, I went to the very coastal area, which is, I would say that this is most climate vulnerable area and hottest spot, okay? So after going there, I found different scenario which was not taught in my institution, which is not taught in meetings, in air-conditioned rooms, okay? So what I want to say that the real scenario is much more different than what I think, okay? So after going there, I found youth of that area, they don't have little knowledge about what is climate change. We are talking about climate adaptation, mitigation, more and more, but they don't have minimum knowledge about what is climate change. On the other hand, we are talking about different technologies, different adaptive technologies in agriculture sector. But in that area, that is saline prone area, that is drought prone area, soil is saline, water is saline water. Okay, so they are not able to produce food for their own as well. So real scenario is totally different, I must say. then what we are trying to do there, and what is the connection between youths and agriculture and women. So we are trying to educate them, educate youths about these things like climate change, agriculture, so that when they will be able to know about it much more, they can connect with the people, with the local people. So that's why we are providing them trainings to youth so that they can contribute to the local problems. And other thing is that as normal agricultural practices are not applicable 100% applicable for the southern part of Bangladesh. So we are trying to provide some adaptive technologies. So whenever we are connecting youths with this, they are much more educated nowadays, and they are able to grab those technologies and provide it to the communities. Okay, so there are some technologies like we talk about drip irrigation. We are talking about mulching. This will help to produce foods with less amount of water. So this is the way we are trying to work in that area. There are almost 22 technologies we are trying to provide to the local people so that they can produce food for them, and also they can take some products to the market as well, which will help them financially. So this is the way we are connecting youths and agriculture as well as women. We are providing them trainings. So as women are, I found that people, women of that area, they are much more working. They're very hard working. They have to go a long way to collect some water, and they are working a lot. That's why we are trying to provide training to them so that they could be engaged in this sector, agriculture sector, and can contribute. So this is the way we are working. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Farzana, and it's really important that your work is connecting with the lived realities of rural youth, because there may be a disconnection, if you want, between what is happening in government circles, NGO circles, academic circles, and what the reality is for people living in rural areas, particularly smallholders and those in poverty. So that's really super. And so what we're going to do next is the next panelist we're going to pose a question to is Darshini. Darshini is our water expert here on the panel. So Darshini, the question that we've devised for yourself is really this question of realizing water security. It requires an inclusive governance system, including participation and representation from those who are most affected. So how good do you think current water security governance systems are at ensuring effective representation of youth, women and marginalised groups? What do you think is working, and what would need to be improved, do you think?
Thank you very much. I have to say, I think this is the first time I've been on a women-only panel, so it's nice. We have a new name for it, Womanal. I mean, water, just to sort of, climate change is primarily a water crisis, right? So if we don't address water in a holistic manner, we risk failing every single one of our SDGs, and particularly that ones that relate to inclusion, equality, diversity, and all of that. So I think just to sort of, it's been really interesting hearing what some of the other panelists have had to say, but I'm going to zoom out a little bit and look at it from a more sort of policy perspective. So how are we making sure that all of this really interesting work that's happening on the ground, that women, youth, and marginal farmers are involved in, how do we ensure that they're adequately represented at the national level, at the international level, and at the regional level in creating policies? So I think, the very simple answer to your question of are governance systems appropriate is no, they're not. But there is a lot that we can learn from, locally led adaptation. There's a lot that can be picked up from case studies in different parts of the world that can be fed into policy at a more to make it truly sort of scalable, truly sustainable, to make sure that finance at different levels, not just from the bottom up, but also from institutional investors, from asset managers, are adequately addressing the goals that will ultimately impact on women, youth, and marginal farmers. I think there's sort of specific things that I work at the International Water Management Institute, and there's programs that we work on, one of which is called Water Resilience Tracker. It's an FCDO funded program, and there we work to ensure that water is suitably incorporated within NDCs, within national adaptation plans. And I think, making sure that water is not just being tracked, because water is such an intrinsic part of, the wider nexus of energy and food systems. They're so linked that often it becomes hard to track how water is allocated, what sort of governance frameworks we have for water. Are we looking, when we're designing frameworks for food and energy, we need to think about water. And we need to also think about how, women, displaced communities, all of them are treated not just as beneficiaries, but they're part of the wider ecosystem. When, for instance, one of the programs we work on is a solar irrigation program, where we look at subsidy disbursement for women. And, for women, technologies like solar are hugely subsidized in many parts of the world, but a lot of the subsidies are not well targeted. They go to larger farmers. So how do we make sure that these are translated to women is extremely important. In Nepal, we had a really good success story where we, through the work and the research that we did, we were able to change the policy so that 1/3 women were given access to solar technologies. We made sure that the policy incorporated that, which is a huge win. We all know how difficult it is to influence policy in this manner. And I think it's very important, like I said, just to sort of circle back, is at the sort of scale where we're looking at making sure that NDCs and NAPs incorporate, when we're looking at energy, food, water policies, make sure that the voices of communities are incorporated in a manner that is truly, in the longer term, sustainable and scalable. That is the only way, I think, to do it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Darshini, and it's really great to get the Water Management Institute's perspectives on water governance, having the long history of activity in that area of the institution. So what I'm going to do is move to our third theme. I'm going to move over to Josephine from the GRA, and really the question for Josephine is a question of in capacity building programs, like how important do you consider like fostering leadership is important in capacity development initiatives with women, youth, and marginalized groups? Why would leadership development be important, and are there winners and losers from leadership development approaches?
Thank you. Really impressive panel. Just want to acknowledge the panel here. Oh my gosh. And great question. So the Global Research Alliance on Agricultural Greenhouse Gases, as you guys have heard, supports and works with international partners to deliver the Cliff Grades program. So one of the key things that are considered, or key things that shapes Cliff Grades, is really making sure that we are enhancing the voices that are at the table. I think we've already heard from the panel about the different experiences with climate change in food systems and agriculture throughout the world, and it's really key that those voices are at the table, and capacity building can provide that type of support, including programs like Cliff Grades. Cliff Grades has, since 2017, I think, supported over 200 students in order to develop some technical skills and innovations that I will never be capable of doing, but are incredibly impressive and will shape the world and the climate action that countries take. So I think that it's important that these people have pathways, and throughout the world, especially in the global south, people have the opportunity to come to these types of international conferences and talk about and showcase the work that they've achieved, the research that they've done. I'm thinking about Byron's presentation earlier, talking about showcasing what women experience when they do have those barriers to programs like Cliff Grads. What can we do? Having these conversations to shape the future of capacity building and making sure that it is an inclusive programs, but also enhance that leadership that it's necessary to really make sure that we can take climate action that supports us to be able to produce food to feed the world, but also mitigate and adapt when it comes to emissions. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Josephine, and it's clearly critical that we foster leadership, particularly from youth and women and marginalised groups, to enable their access to the processes that affect their future and the future of their communities. We're going to go around again with some more questions because we've got a very good panel, so we should keep asking them questions. I think it's important. So there's a question for Hajar, right? So does this youth and women? We can't consider them homogenous groups. There are poorer women, richer women, lots of different types of women and youth. So how can we ensure that youth and women leaders on climate adaptation truly represent the needs and the interests of youth and women? And which youth and women do they represent? How do we ensure things like legitimacy and representation amongst women and youth leaders for climate adaptation efforts? So are there mechanisms to ensure that the leaders are really the leaders and representing those that they claim to lead?
Hi again. Thank you so much for the question. So here I want to talk about what EAS exactly do for youth and women. And so at EAS we understand that the representation starts with inclusion. So we ensure that our delegates and the leaders come from diverse backgrounds, women and men, representing voice from rural areas to urban centers, throughout transparent selection process and community consultations. We make sure that legitimacy is rooted in a trust and engagement of the people they represent. But representation is not enough. We equipped our youth and women leaders with the knowledge, tools, and platforms they need to speak effectively at a global stage like COPs, SBs, and UN conferences. So throughout our initiatives like Women in Agriculture projects, we amplify their voices, showcasing local solutions that can inspire global actions. So last year I was the Women in Agriculture coordinator with 4 other women from diverse regions, and we lead effectively this project to empower women in all levels, starting from support them to participate in our global project competition. And then we organize an exclusive competition for women in agriculture. We received more than 40 projects around the world, and the selection was really transparent, based on their capacities and based on the project itself. Here I'm gonna talk about our training and capacity building that our EAS training committee offer to our members, women and youth. So as I said, we give them knowledge and tools and platforms to be effectively represented. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Hajar, because it's really great that you have processes for representation and legitimacy within the processes that you're engaged in. Yeah, so that's really great. Yeah, that's no problem. Then the next question really we'd like to pose to Darshini, which it's a question around policy barriers that may exist at the national level that could be preventing women, youth, or marginalised groups from participating effectively in decision making around water security, and if there are any examples of such policy barriers, what would they be, and what might be done to address them? If you have any kind of thoughts in relation to that.
I think one of the main policy barriers, I would say, even after all these years, is understanding the needs of the communities. So understanding what it is that is the problem, and it's so context specific as well. It could be cultural barriers that are different. There's institutional barriers. There's so many. There's like a whole list of barriers, I think. So I think primarily, prior to designing policies and programs, there's a need to conduct, serious needs assessments around and making sure that the right people are involved in not just participating in these, but in also conducting these assessments. In one of the sort of needs assessment surveys that we did at IMI recently, we realized that all of the people, the surveyors that we had hired to ask the questions, they were all men. And in some parts of India, women are not going to feel comfortable to talk about what their problems are with these men. And the men are not going to understand how to approach and ask the right questions and make them feel comfortable. So we made sure that we created a training. We did a training of trainers at TOT, but we made sure that we got women on board for that. And since then, we've actually incorporated, and I don't know why we didn't have this before, but incorporated within the need to have women surveyors when we have them within our organization, but sometimes when we contract out, we need to make sure that all of these boxes are ticked. And I think, so understanding, basically doing a needs assessment with the right people is critical, and feeding that back to that top level is going to really help women, like I said, not just be beneficiaries, but also be catalysts to change. So, really asking their opinion so that they can be suitably incorporated within policy planning.
Thanks very much, Darshini. And so the next question I'm going to pose to all of the panelists, right? So it's really, so next year the countries update their NDCs. So this process is underway in every one of the member states of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement for NDC submissions. They're supposed to ramp up ambition from one round to the next round, and so I'd be really interested to hear from each of you if you have any experiences or any perceptions or thoughts in relation to what extent women and youth are effectively engaged in NDC processes at the national level. You can give examples if you have any, or thoughts on what you think may be necessary. But not only the NDCs, there's national adaptation plans being developed, there's national biodiversity strategies and action plans, there's national strategies and desertification depending on the country. So in that sense, there are lots of national processes underway, but do you feel that women and youth are effectively engaged in those national processes and to help realize the ambition that is expected? I'm going to start with Farzana.
So nice of you that you remind my name. Okay, thank you again. So what you were asking for, like in national adaptation plan and women and youth engagement. So what I would love to say that our country, and I am working in the area that is known as Satkira, Munshiganj, that area. So research or data is showing that almost 20 or 30 years later, that area will be inundated under the sea. Okay, so where I'm working now, that will be inundated within 20 or 30 years. Okay, so this is the condition. So we have our headache that we will be drowned. That's why our government is trying to do something for the people of that area or overall Bangladesh. So in our national adaptation plan, there is plan to provide them some adaptive techniques as well as including women, youths in that program, in that policies. Like during whenever the COP29 is going on, so one of our one woman from the very vulnerable area, climate vulnerable area, she's here. And I found her. She is talking about what is going on in her area and what she faced, her family faced, her children faced. Okay, so we took her. We take her in this platform as well. And there are some youth from Bangladesh who are leading different programs here, who are talking about their needs. What she was mentioning, like, we are taking or we are planning to do something, but we are not doing it on need based. Okay, so what is needed to them? What should be applicable for them? What they are wanting? It is important, but our government is trying to do so. They are engaging peoples, they are engaging youths as well as women in different programs and policy making situations. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I agree with most of what Farzana said. I think just, making sure that, people from vulnerable communities, including women, are adequately represented in those conversations. I know it's easier said than done, but I think it's important to go that extra mile and make that extra effort to make sure, when we do extension agent training, having women extension agents, there's lots of women who are so engaged in agriculture, in water management. So just making sure that we reach out to them and make that extra effort to bring them on board to conversations and consultations that happen on NDCs and NAPs, I think is what's important.
I want to share with you one of the experience or one of the initiatives we have in the national level in Morocco. So in 2020, an initiative starts that's called the national initiative to empower the community. And in this side, we have like a part that take care of women and youth, especially to help their small projects financially. So you just need to have it to prepare some documents for your project and then present it, and then it's gonna like a small process, and you can benefit from financial support from the government. And yeah, I think that helped them to increase their household first and to make their voice really heard in the society. Then in Morocco, we still have faced some problems for women education, and in this side, we start offering some courses to those women to educate them. So we still have empower women in businesses and education too.
Thanks. So I think everyone on the panel has kind of knocked that nail on the head when it comes to talking about our expectations or how we're going to build these plans to reduce emissions or to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And a large part of that is, engaging with the people who are catalysts for change, as Dashini said. In New Zealand, as I'm here as a party, what we do with all of our legislation, not necessarily just special to climate change, but we engage with our Indigenous people, Māori. And so we consult with them and build policies along them, making sure that those minority groups who are often impacted significantly more have a voice in the way that we develop policies. When we're thinking about looking offshore, it's programs like Cliff Grads and the feedback like we've had. that Byron presented, where we shape programs to make sure that women are participating in these international collaboration processes, which again, I'm just really reiterating key messages that we've already heard from the panel today. As we look towards next year, where more NDCs, will progressively be announced, I think it's an exciting time, especially for women, to be able to be here and advocate for our opinions being included. I think that, we have a day dedicated to the inclusion of, gender, youth and other minority groups, and we really need to use our voices and, take up the space that we deserve, especially when it comes to climate change. I think that we've already heard some amazing work from other keynote speakers today, and I just want to kind of motivate or implore everyone to take up your space in those conversations, carve out and make sure that women, and other minority voices are heard. We matter, and all of these NDCs and NAPs should consider the impacts on our groups too. Thanks.
Thanks, Josie, for the call to action and the pointer towards the NDCs and the NAP processes. Okay, so I think we have a little bit of time for maybe some questions from the audience. If anybody has a question from the audience, they'd place their hand up. So we have 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to go in this order. I'm going to go Eliza, the man at the back, and then yourself. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we have an all-women panel. First time I've seen as well. I have a question for Darshini, as well as for Josie. For Darshini, you said we have to make sure that whatever we do as scientists, I'm from the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, we're sister centers. What are your lessons learned in terms of how do you do that? Because you just say we have to make sure, but based on your experience, how were you able to navigate the challenges of making sure that the evidence that we have, as well as our experience engaging with farmers and women, get into these important policies? And this is more at the national level engagement. And then I have a question for Josie. By the way, I am co-administering Cliff Grads for Mitigate Plus. So the question for me is, I'm also engaging with negotiators. But how do we ensure, like for example, the study by Byron gets to inform, the international level policy considerations? Because I've been hearing this in many sessions I've been into. Like farmers, how do we, put our experience out there so that it can be considered in international global policy considerations on climate change? So yeah, so those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you. I think a really good example is what we did with solar irrigation in Nepal. I think I briefly spoke about it, but I think the best way to do it is to communicate that science effectively. I think that's what all of our CG centers aim to do at the end of the day. But making sure that it's written in a way, convert those scientific papers and scientific evidence into policy briefs. That can then be presented to policymakers. And in addition to that, bring in policymakers when we do program design at the very early stage. That's something that we're doing at IMI as well. So speaking to policymakers when designing proposals, so that they're adequately, they tell us this is what we want to see, this is the evidence that we want to see that can better supplement and complement the programs and policies that we're designing. So I think that's, I hope that answers your question. And also, I guess, forums and, exchanging knowledge, South-South knowledge, forums like this, huge stages like this, presenting the evidence in a way that's appealing and understandable to policymakers, I think. Translating that evidence is what's key.
Thanks very much, Darshini. I'm just going to bring the microphone. Somebody... Another question?
Thanks. Great question. Hello, colleague on Cliff Grads. I think as an agriculture negotiator, ag in itself is a negotiating item that's treated kind of differently. It's already on its own silo when it comes to the UNFCCC. But I think the power comes from kind of what we were talking about in relation to water being a holistic and, it's something that's relevant across all climate related negotiations. I think for me, participation and engagement in the international initiatives that CG and also FAO are part of, providing engagement there and shaping and engaging with negotiators in those contexts can be quite influential to make sure that there is, or we are considering and advocating for the experiences of women and other minorities. So, you know, there's like the FAST partnership, which was launched at COP27 by Egypt, and then also FAO helps to service, and there's a range of others that are launched every single year. And a lot of us agriculture negotiators also lead on on our country participation within those initiatives. So I would recommend that as a good pathway to engage with us and really make sure that these thoughts are on the forefront of our minds as we go to negotiate. Final thing, sorry, I feel like I'm talking a bit. In our negotiations here at this COP, we negotiated or agreed to an online portal or the format of a portal, and that provides the opportunity to submit on projects and efforts and initiatives that are going on. And yeah, I would recommend having a look at that page and seeing if it's a suitable place to chuck some information up. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, that's great. No need to be sorry, it's really super. So I'm just going to go to the man at the back here.
Hi there. Thanks so much. Great panel. Really enjoyed it. My name is Marcus Taylor. I'm a researcher based at Queen's University, Canada. A quick question, perhaps more for Farzana or Dashini. Monitoring and evaluation. I wondered if you are seeing any innovations in this, because specifically with climate resilient agricultural programs in general, there seems to be a bit of a deficit in monitoring and evaluation, and certainly when it comes to the kinds of social impacts that we're talking about. Two quick examples: been running a number of projects around climate resilient agriculture in India and post project. And for example, we're looking at one particular set of technologies that had been diffused across a particular area. We went to the organizing agencies and they swore that hundreds of farmers were using these. They didn't realize that we'd been done 3 weeks of research before and couldn't find a single farmer for a variety of complicated social and gender reasons which are still using them, and yet the agency was still reporting these as a big success, etc. Seemed to be a blockage in institutional learning there. Another one, major World Bank project in rural Maharashtra, and it really emphasized the achievements of the project, and yet they didn't look at who had benefited from it. So I think you'd mentioned sort of a elite capture of resources, etc. This was preponderant across this project. Again, it wasn't part of monitoring, evaluation, etc. So are you seeing any ways in which this kind of process, I know it's really difficult, I know resources are limited, but it does seem fundamental to trying to address these kinds of things to make sure there is an effectiveness around equity as well as other program deliverables. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll be very quick. I think one of the ways to address that is to conduct, to incorporate M&E. You know, a lot of projects are now doing that throughout the project itself, particularly do a midterm evaluation. I used to be in UK government, and we used to insist on having midterm evaluations, and I think that's a great time to pick up on any deficiencies, particularly when it relates to things like jersey and inclusion, and then, you know, essentially force the project partner to work on that in whatever time is left. But yeah, I think M&E should be incorporated throughout the life of the project, and they should be touch points rather than just doing it right at the end.
Okay, I would say more or less like her. And one thing is that whenever we are going for adaptive techniques or something like that, before that, if we do some feasibility studies in that area, that would be very great. And you mentioned that our resource is very limited. Okay, so we need to do something with that limited resource. And we have our M&E officers, and we are doing midterm evaluation from the donor side. Like our core project is strengthening livelihood security security of climate change vulnerable people that is funded by the Bread for the World from Germany. So they are going for a midterm evaluation regularly. So this is how we are doing things. But the fact is that what we are trying to provide, we will not get 100% positive result. This is the ultimate truth. Okay, then if we are not getting positive result, we will go for another techniques or another things. I think you get your point. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I've just been given a signal that we're going to have to wrap the session up pretty soon. So I've apologized to our member in the audience here that we can do a one-to-one question with the individuals later. And so I think we're coming to the end of this really enriching, informative and very granular session. I think it's really a great session within COP29. I've been to a good few sessions here, but this has been one of the most detailed ones I've seen. We have a full audience, which is really, really wonderful, and an engaging audience. So like, I'm just going to do a quick recap. Like we you know, the theme, we looked at three themes: the women and youth-led climate adaptation, inclusive policies for water security, and also enabling access for women and minorities in terms of capacity building. And I think we've got like detailed recommendations, detailed experiences from all of our speakers and our panelists in relation to all of those. We've had Byron with the study, and the study is important in terms of shaping an important capacity building program, namely the Cliff Grads program. Then we had the video from the Ban Ki-moon Center. Like, that was a super video. It really communicated a lot of the kind of key points and really highlighted issues like financing being critical, and financing at the grassroots level, at the farmers levels, at the rural community levels, that is critical if climate adaptation is to be realized and if the equity aspects of climate adaptation are to be realized. It also pointed towards partnerships, the importance of partnerships between organizations like the CGIAR, like the Ban Ki-moon Center, farmers organizations, private sector, local companies, entrepreneurs, and so forth. And then we had the youth champions. Like, what a wonderful program that the Ban Ki-moon Center run. And then we had in person one of the youth champions themselves, Aoife, and really it was really great that you could show up here with the demands of the youth champions and point to the real need for access to translates down to local level is really critically important, and you really pointed towards that. But it wasn't only access to finance, it was also access to data and questions around open access to data, who owns data. This is really important as well in this kind of big data world we live in, with remote sensing and with satellites and with geospatial data. Who owns farmers' data? And these are questions that are important for decision making. And then the questions of assets, access to land and water, and the assets are necessary, which are really critical for those that are disadvantaged, such as women and youth. And they have less access to the assets that are necessary to engage in the climate adaptation for the future. So I think you did a really super job in communicating that. And then our panel, they covered so many topics. Like Hajar pointed towards that there are existing mechanisms like savings groups. There are clearly transparent mechanisms for participation. Farzana talked about the lived realities at the local level and about climate smart agriculture options, bundles of options, and engaging local communities in deciding themselves of which options are most appropriate for them. Darshini talked about water governance and a really major equity issue within the overall system. So, and Darshini also pointed towards the need to understand the needs and the importance of needs assessment to inform policies, and also needs assessments to inform the NDCs, the NAPs, the National Biodiversity Strategies, and so forth. Josephine pointed out to the importance of leadership, and that there are channels of entry, if you want, into the national processes and indeed the multilateral processes that are here. So it's important, and she made a call to action for women and youth to step up and step in to those processes. And so that's really, really important. It was really wonderful also to hear everybody's perspectives in relation to the NDCs, the NAPs and so forth, the national processes, and to hear that there are processes underway that are enabling women, youth and minorities to engage in those processes, particularly because they are the most vulnerable and most highly affected by climate change as it rolls forward. Then we had these wonderful questions from the audience, from Eliza on how do we communicate to policymakers, how do we communicate needs and findings. These are really critical issues. And then the question around MEL. And in some sense, a lot of the climate financing, for many of the multilateral banks, it's easier to finance infrastructure projects, whereas financing social capital is harder to finance, and it's also harder to measure. And I think your question kind of points to that, but a lot can be achieved by expanding the scale and the nature and the depth of financing for social capital, for topics like empowerment, for social inclusion and equity and fairness within our agri-food system. So I think it's been a really wonderful session. I'd like to thank all of our audience, thank all of our speakers, all of our panelists, thank the organisers, and